So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me on today's CoolCare Masterclass, where we'll be looking at rota management again to follow on from our last one. This is going to be more advanced stuff on the rota side of things today we'll be seeing. So, as always, CoolCare is here to help make operating your care home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. Today, focusing on the easier side of things, hopefully, with our rotas on there and getting the most out of them. Well, throughout today's masterclass, if anyone does have any questions, you can use Zoom to ask them. There should be an option to ask questions on your Zoom window where you can type up a question and a member of our team will be able to see it and answer it for you. So I've got someone on hand to answer any questions you might have. So you can ask questions as we're going through, or at the end as well, we'll have a little time after we've finished for you to answer any further questions you might have before we all disappear on that. So yeah, anything you think of, don't be afraid to ask as we're going through, and we'll do our best to answer any and all questions that you might have. As I say, today we'll be looking at our rotas again, following on from our previous session. This one will be a bit more of a advanced class, as we said, looking at updating your shifts in the rota in both the short term and the long term as well, and seeing how your staff can interact with the rota as well by our messaging function. So we'll be covering looking at kind of adding additional shifts and space onto rota where we might need it, even splitting shifts up as well, updating your rota itself via the rota setup, seeing that side of things, and understanding how our staff messaging works to find cover shifts where they might be needed. So with that in mind, I'm going to swap over to my demo system and we'll get things underway. Just to note, all the data you see is just all from my demo site. It's all fictional stuff, so no real data actually being used on this. So let's swap over to my demo sites and go over to the Rota and show you it in a moment. And there we are. So this is my Rota. Again, my live Rota on CoolCare. As you can see, nice and filled up with staff members already, with shifts all filled in. And again, for anyone unfamiliar, this live Rota is essentially taking information from your Rota setup in the background to then create it and be able to add your staff on there, which we did see in the last one. For today, we'll say we'll be doing kind of some additional things you can do on this Rota to keep it up to date with changes to your staffing and things that we might need to be aware of. The main thing being if we need to add in additional shifts. So let's say I've got all my shifts filled in here with all my staff members, and that's all good. But what if I've got something else going on day? I might have an event in the home where I need extra staff in. I might need someone to come in to just do a one-to-one shift with a certain residents in there. Whatever we might need, an extra pair of hands for a few hours, anything like that, we can add in additional shifts on the rota here. And we can do that essentially in any of the gaps we've got. So you can see I've actually added on some extra space onto my rota to be able to add in some additional shifts where I might need them. So I've got these empty rows underneath all my regular shifts. If you click into any of those gaps you've got, just by select, let's say a Friday, for example, we might want to add in an extra shift on a Friday there. Click in that empty space, and it then brings up this box here. Tell me we can add in a new shift for a care assistant on the 3rd of October. To do that, we click on the shift box there to say what shift we want to add on. And this can be either one of your regular shift times that are already set up in the system by your shift definitions in the home setup. You can find them in there. Or it can be an ad hoc shift. So if it is something out of the ordinary, you can do it as an ad hoc one on here. It'll be slightly different from your regular shift times that you might have set up already. So we can do it as an ad hoc one in this case. You choose your day period, which comes into the budgeting side of things, kind of what it falls under, or just the day on there. And then you pop in the times of the shift, one you want it to be for. So start time, let's say it's going to be a few extra hours in the day from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. 6 hours in there. Well, it tells me that's going to be a 6-hour shift in there. That's all good. We can then click add shift to save it. And that creates our new shift on the rota right there. From there, it works like any other shift you've seen in the system before. It's a white one that starts off unassigned. You can then click into it and choose who you want to assign to it. So you can see you've got your regular shift staff members available for it, or even agency if you need to bring in them instead. But from here, we just pick the person who wants by clicking on them from here, like we've seen before, and it will just assign them onto that shift. And that's, yeah, add the extra shift onto the system, and then you can assign a staff member to it from there. That does have a little side effect on your budget from the rota. If you remember this little bit at the top of the call coding above each group, that's comparing to your budget set up in the rota setup to say how many people you should have in it based on how many people you have on the rota there. And you can see on the Friday where I've added in that additional shift, it's gone blue. And that's because we're now gone over budget on that day. I've added an extra shift, and so it shows as blue to signify that you've added in extras and got over the original budget that was set up. So in this case, it says there now five out of 4 shifts planned in on there, 5 compared to the original 4, 54 hours compared to the original 48 that was set from my setup. So if you are adding in additional shifts, just be aware you might see some blue on your rota to show that it's gone over budget, but it's just there to tell you that. Nothing is going to say go wrong if you do it like that. So yeah, that's how you can add in additional shifts where you might need them on a day. It does help to have some additional space in the rota in order to do that, which I can actually show you when we come to the rota setup side of it in a moment. But before we do that, those extra shifts can also be used in different ways to kind of replace shifts as well with that. So it might be, for example, that we need to split a shift. Say a staff member said they can only do half a day now. We need someone to essentially split that shift to cover the rest of the day as well. And we can do that by deleting a shift and just replacing it with a new one by adding in as we saw. So I'll take this one for today, just for the example in here. Maria here said she actually needs to leave partway through the day, so she can no longer do the full day shift, but she can work up till sometime this afternoon. So I can click on that shift there and essentially delete the original full day shift. I don't need the 7x7 in there anymore, so I can delete that version. So click on the shift and you've got the red button there to delete it. It'll bring up your options, well, your details of the shift that we're about to delete on there, just to be aware of it. It says there the staff member will be unassigned from it, so the person will be taken off the shift. But the big thing is it doesn't affect a rolling shift pattern. So this isn't affecting anything in the long run. It's just this one shift on today we're deleting rather than anything repeating. And that's the same with all the changes you make to the rota, as we've seen before. It's all about small short-term changes, not anything in the long term. So I can then delete that shift from there to confirm, and that will remove it from that space. You can see it's gone from there now. But as we've just seen, if we click into any empty space we've got, we can add in a brand new shift. So from there, I can either do it as an ad hoc shift or one of my regular shift times again. I'm actually going to do it as an ad hoc one, just to show you. I'll pop it in as a day. So I'm going to say they could do from the start time up till sometime this afternoon, let's say 3 o'clock, for example. They can do 8 hours today. Add that shift in, and then that adds it in, as we've seen before, just like a new one. And we can then assign that to who was originally assigned to it. It was Maria. Pop her in there. But that only covers half of my, it only covers up to 3 o'clock. As you can see, we still need to do it up to the 7 p.m. for the rest of the shift. So that's where we can go underneath that and add in another brand new shift. Just do it as another ad hoc one, the rest of the day in there from 3 o'clock till 7 p.m. Add that in, pops it in underneath, and just like before, click into it, and I can say I've found one to cover that now. So I'm going to pop in, let's put Courtney on there, for example. And that pops it in there. So that way we can see that, Maria is now doing from 7 up till 3 p.m. And we've got someone else covering the rest from 3 p.m. up until 7 p.m. And again, that does slightly affect my budget at the top, as you can see there. It's actually a mixture of blue and green now. So it's blue in the sense that we've gone over budget in terms of the number of shifts. We had 4 shifts planned in originally. Now we've got 5 in there because we split one shift into 2. However, the hours still add up to 48 because we've split a shift rather than adding in an additional one. So it shows that we're actually still in budget in terms of hours. We've just added in an extra shift because, as I say, we've split one shift into 2, but it still covers the same amount of hours. So you can kind of see a combination of blue and green, or it might be, if that one was unassigned, green and red on there as well. So you can see kind of multiple colors on one day on your rota if you do split shifts on there. But again, there's no great worry on there. It's just there to say that we've done that pizza. So that's how you would handle split shifts on there. And finally, you can also use that kind of deleting of shifts to just change the timings of a shift. So if you don't need to split one, but you might need to change the times of it on a single occurrence. Say instead of, someone might start and finish an hour later for a shift rather than doing, the regular one, we can, again, update that to reflect it. So if I use another one, let's say this one on a Saturday here, say this person's come in and say they can't do, the 7x7 shift, they might need to start and finish an hour later, do 8x8 instead. I can click on that there. And again, delete that original shift. We don't want the 7x7 in there anymore. So get rid of that one. Again, same box comes up. This will not affect the rolling shift pattern. It's only the single occurrence we're deleting. And once again, go back into the empty space and we can add in a brand new shift on there. Do it as an ad hoc one. And we can have that set to start and finish an hour later. And then, as we've seen before, just click back into it and we can assign a staff member back on that shift as well. So yeah, deleting of shifts and replacing them is, I guess, more useful than you might originally think. You might think on your rota, oh, why would I ever want to delete a shift? I want to keep all my shifts on there. I'm not want to remove anything from it. But it's useful in case you need to change something about the shift itself. Like I say, as we've just seen, splitting a shift to change it on there or changing the timings of the shift from one to another, you can delete it and replace it from there. As easy as that. Just remember, if you're doing split shifts or adding in additional ones, it can affect your budget up at the top with that core coding that we've got there. But yes, that's the idea with splitting shifts, change them around, extra ones in there. So adding and removing shifts, keep things up to date whenever we need to. That's kind of, I say, some changes there you can make in the short term. However, what if we need to make some more long-term changes to our rota? We might need to update someone's shift pattern to update that for them, or add some more space on the rota, adding the new staff on the rota on there. Which a question has just come in asking that exact question. How would we add extra onto the column on here? So that's all done via our rota setup. So I can actually get to the rota setup from the live rota using this purple button up at the top there. You can see rota setup. And that will take us to this page here, which is under the care home section. Your rota setup here is, like I say, where you would do any long-term changes to your rota, essentially where we can add on additional rows to the rota to add on extra positions or add on new shift patterns or update a shift pattern for a staff member on there. If I just needed to add on some extra room, I can just click this button at the top there, push shift pattern, and add on whatever positions I might need. So if I wanted, a third extra care assistant row, I could just click care assistant there, save it, and it will add it onto the rota here as a third row on the bottom. But if it was, and then from there you can, create a shift pattern for them or create some budget, whatever it needs to be for that. And where you can also come here to essentially overwrite a shift pattern, change someone's shift pattern in the long run on there as well. So I might take my two seniors here, they're going to update their shift pattern slightly to change things around. If we click on the position there, senior carer, or on the staff member's name, it'll bring up this box here, the shift pattern builder. And this is where, in the first instance, you'd come to build the shift pattern for a staff member. In this case, I'm essentially overriding the shift pattern with a new one that I want them to work to. So currently they work 4 on, 3 off, and the other one works 4 off, 3 on there. We might want to change that. We can do it using it on here. So just by going into it, we can create the shift pattern for them, whatever it would be. And with that, it could literally, I'm going to do, just change it to something quite different, but simple on there. Just have them as day on, day off. So they're just going to work opposite days essentially with that. And because this is, so here just to explain, when you're building a shift pattern, essentially do it as number of days on versus number of days off for that. And you can kind of go back and forth as much as you need to, but it can also be as simplified as you want. So this is literally going to be essentially a 2-day pattern on there saying they have 1 day on, 1 day off. They just work every other day on my rota. And because this 2-day pattern fits into my 14-day rota, as I've got mine set up for, it's able to build that pattern for me. If I click that on there, it will just change it to there, 1 day on, 1 day off, back and forth on there. And I can do the same thing on the other senior there, clicking on them. This time I guess going 1 day off and then 1 day on. And again, because it's essentially just going back and forth every other day, it's able to build that for me into my full rota for me, and that's so. With these here, with those, so you can make the changes in the rota setup as easily as that, and update them. But the big thing is the rota setup doesn't affect your live rota right away. So I've updated this in here, but it's not changed anything on my live version. Whenever you make changes to your rota setup, you will then need to apply those changes. Applying those changes essentially takes what you've done on the rota setup and updates it on the live rota on there. So if I click apply changes on here, it will tell me it's going to create an actual rota based on the changes we've made. And it will ask for a date of first shift, essentially saying when you want the changes to take effect from. And you'll have some dates to select from based on how your rota was set up initially from there. Now, there's kind of 2 ways you can go about this in here. Firstly, you could, if you want the changes to just take effect immediately, you can do it from today's date or even a date in the past in there, and it will just take effect right away from the date you select. Or you can choose a set date in the future for it to take effect from as well. So if I say, these changes were going to take place from next Monday, I can select there Monday the 6th, it will tell me that's week 2, day 8 of my shift pattern. It just means it's going to be taking place from that kind of day of the pattern in there. And then the changes would essentially take over the rota from that day on the 6th. Just be aware if you do it that way, if you choose a date in the future when you're creating your actual rota, it will lock down your rota setup and you won't be able to edit it again until that date has passed. So if I was to set mine to start from next Monday the 6th, I won't be able to edit my rota setup any further this week without essentially undoing those changes and doing them and having to do them again. So to avoid myself doing that, I'm just going to say to take effect from, I'm just going to do it from yesterday essentially, or even the start of this week. We can say it took effect from in there, which is week 1, day 1 of my pattern. I then click create rota on there, and it will take me back to my staff rota. And from there, I should see the new shift patterns have taken over from there. You can see scrolling across, I'll say that essentially every other day working is now set up for my senior carers at the top. And yes, changing this will not affect essentially anything existing on your rota. So any changes you've made to your live rota, such as extra shifts you've added in, shifts you've deleted and changed on there, or updated through that, you can see are all still the same. So all the little changes I've made there, the extra shift I've added in, the split shift I did, even that shift I just changed the timings of, yes, that won't affect anything on that side of things. It's essentially only the stuff you will have changed on the rota setup that will be changed by applying them, if that's. So you're not going to lose any changes you make on the live rota if you are playing around with it. And when you then change the rota setup, it's only going to affect what it should do essentially on there. So yeah, that's to say how updating rota setup can change things on the live one. There are some smaller changes you can make to rota setup as well to affect things slightly differently. So if I actually go back to my rota setup again, you can change the layout of the rota to kind of how it's how it's set up in here. That's on there. So if you click this button in the top right corner that says back to current, it brings up this box here. It changes the rota view ever so slightly to say it's now currently applied, which is essentially showing you how it looks on the live rota, which in my case, is exactly the same because I've just applied those changes. But more importantly, it gives you these extra buttons next to each position and next to each group on your rota as well. So you can actually change the setup and layout of the rota. You can reorder the shifts you've got on here. So I can move stuff up and down if I want to, moving these extra carers or whatever. I can update that as I need to. You can see how that extra row moves up and down in there. You can even change the actual groups themselves. So if I wanted to put my night shifts at the top of my rota or my days, I can move those up to the top as well. See how they change in there. And you can even rename the shift groups with a little pencil icon next to them. There, you can change those just by renaming them in there. But yeah, it's all just small, essentially visual changes to the rota rather than anything that's going to affect how it actually runs. So you can do those again just using that back to current button in the top right corner, and those changes will take effect immediately as well. You don't have to apply those; they just happen right away. We'll update on the live rota. So yeah, you can make small changes and tweaks to the layout of the rota. Once you've got stuff set up, if you had a new line on there, you can then put it up with the rest if you need to. If it's right down the bottom, you can change things around. So you can make those changes at any time. That's yeah. Okay, so the last thing to show for today is finding cover for our shifts. So where we can see where we've got any unassigned shifts in the rota, we can find cover for those via what's called staff messaging. So you can see I've got a shift for tonight that I need to find cover for still, and now this one unassigned one. If I click into it, I have my options. So you've got your regular, the box will come up telling you that we need to who is available for the shift based on their positions and everything. But you'll have on the right-hand side the option to message staff, which is to say you can send a text message from the rota asking if they're able to cover this shift. With that, as long as they have a mobile number on the staff record, they can receive those staff messages from the system, and you just click the button next to the person you want to send a message to. So I'm going to send it to a couple of staff members on mine here. And they will then receive a text message from CoolCare. Unfortunately, I can't show that text message because it is on my mobile phone here on my desk. But it is on an actual phone that I'm doing this. And they will receive a message from the system telling them about the shift. So it says you've been requested to cover a shift and gives some more details there. The home it's for, the position, the date and time. So all the information they would need to know for the shift. And then in that message, they can click on a link to open up a web page on the mobile. And from there, they can say yes or no if they're able to do it. So I might just do it for these two staff members. We're going to say one can say yes, and another will say no. There we are. Now, once a staff member responds to the shift, just looking at the rota head on from here, you can't tell that they've responded to it. It won't give you any notifications or anything like that. Just looking at the rota face on from here. It's where you want to use this button in the top right corner. Next to your rota setup, you'll have one that says cover requests. If you click that, it'll bring up this box on the left-hand side of the rota, which will be a list of all the shifts you sent out messages for to see if people have responded to them. So we can see there the one shift for tonight, I've sent out a message for it. It's in my care nights group. The position is care assistant nights. I sent it to two people, and you can see here one person said yes and one person said no. If they've not responded, it would say 1, 2 are waiting on there as well. So it gives you an overview of if people have responded. You can easily see it in there. From that, I can then go into the shift itself, so I know what shift I'm looking at now, which obviously in my case it's quite obvious. But once they respond, you can see where it had that little question mark to say they're not responded yet on here. It now has a tick and a cross. So one person said yes with a tick there, and the other person said no with a red cross. And it even tells me the exact date and time they've responded, in case, it might be first come, first serve, who's responded the soonest, who would get this. But in this case, it's just the one person that has said yes, so we know who to choose. As you can see, you still have to select who you want to do the shift once people have responded. It's not going to choose for you and assign them automatically. You still have to select the staff member once everyone has made their response. So in this case, it's just the one person that said yes, Harry here. So I can then click on him from the shift, which will put him on there, assign him to it. And it will even send him another text message to let him know that he's been assigned to it. With this little bit turned on the top there, text staff when assigned to shift, that turned on, it just sends a staff member a text message when you put them on an individual shift. You don't have to ask them first, it's just when you put someone on a single shift, it will send them a text to let them know. So it's good as a confirmation in that regard. That staff messaging is very useful for just finding extra cover shifts where you might need it. But yes, with that, that's everything to look at for our rota management for today. That's awesome. Same extra tips to help get the most out of your rotas from that. Now I've just got a couple more slides to show you before we do wrap up. So let me just move back over to here. That's where we are now. So firstly, if you are interested in any further training on CoolCare, wherever you might be dealing with, whether that's finance, payroll, rotas, or tracking of residents, whatever it might be, you can get in touch with us at training and we can be able to sort out some training for you. You might be entitled to some free of charge as part of your CoolCare subscription, at least 2 30-minute sessions available. You can contact us at training@coolcare.co.uk or call our team as well to be able to get that training sorted. And all that's left to say then after that is thank you for joining this webinar today. We will stick around for a couple of minutes just to answer any questions people might have on there. But for anyone leaving, our next session will be in 2 weeks' time, and it'll be looking at how CoolCare can help with cash flow. And as well as that, you will receive an email with the recording, a link to the recording of this session as well. And on there, we'd really appreciate it. There'll be a link to leave some feedback. If you can leave that as well, that would be really useful. Helps us to make these even better than they already are, of course. So yes, thank you all for joining me. Like I say, if anyone wants to stick around and ask some questions, you can use the Q&A option on Zoom, and we'll be here for another 5 minutes just to answer any questions you might have. But if not, thank you all for joining, and I hope to see you again next time for our next masterclass.